What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and today we're going to take a look at one player to watch for every team this preseason. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, starting off with the Cardinals, we got Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, his standards were set super high for him since he was really born, since he's the son of Colts Hall of Famer Marvin Harrison Sr. He lit up college football at Ohio State, which led to the Cardinals selecting him with the 4th overall pick in this last year's draft. And the Cardinals are hoping that he can pick up the slack left behind from Hollywood Brown, which was their former number 1 receiver, and I think he can. Next up, we got the Falcons, and I got Michael Penix Jr. Now, the reason I'm going to say him is the chances are he's not going to start, but the Falcons must have seen something very, very good in him to select him in the first round when they already signed Kirk Cousins to a long-term deal. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him, see how he fits with the team, because at some point, it might not be this season, but at some point, he's going to take over for this team. At least that's what the Falcons intend on. Up next, we got the Ravens, and my pick is Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman has been an alright NFL player so far. He hasn't had that breakout that the Ravens have been hoping for the past 2 or 3 seasons, and this season might be it. They have Zay Flowers, and then up next is probably Rashad Bateman. So the Ravens are going to need a big step up from Rashad Bateman, and it'll start this preseason. The next team we got up is the Buffalo Bills, and my pick is Keon Coleman. The Bills parted ways with Stephon Diggs, who was, Josh Allen's number 1 receiver for a few years now, and the Bills don't really have a number 1 receiver, or at least a clear-cut one. It could be Khalil Shakir, it could be Keon Coleman. We don't know yet. And this preseason is going to be a big telling on who's going to be that number 1 guy. And I think Keon Coleman has a really good chance of being that guy. Just because he's that big physical target that Josh Allen can just throw the ball to whenever he gets in trouble. Up next, we got the Panthers. And, Bryce Young, it's pretty clear that he did not have a great rookie season. But I've never seen a team try to, just not have their rookie quarterback do well. I mean, the offensive line was terrible. The offense in general was terrible. The coordinating was terrible. Everything was bad for Bryce Young. This year, they brought in a revamped offensive line, brought in Deontay Johnson, drafted a really good running back in Jonathan Brooks. They remade this whole offense for Bryce Young, and this is a do-or-die point for Bryce Young. If he has another bad season, his time might have ran out as a starter. So it all starts in the preseason, and we got to see what he's made of. On to the Bears, and my pick is Caleb Williams. He was the number 1 overall pick in this past year's draft. He's been kind of picked as the savior of this Bears organization, and I think he can do it. The Bears really helped him out with their offense, with bringing in Rome Odunze in this past year's draft, as well as getting Keenan Allen alongside DJ Moore. So he has one of the best wide receiver cores in the league. So if he doesn't do well in this offense, it's going to be very, very concerning. Moving on to the Bengals, and my pick is Myles Murphy. They picked him in the first round of the 2023 draft, and he didn't see as much playing time last year as you might think a first-round rookie would see, and coming into this year, he's still a second-string player on the depth chart. But I think with a really good preseason, he could solidify his spot as a starter this upcoming season. Up next, we got the Browns, and my pick is DeJuan Jones. He's the backup offensive tackle for the Browns, and he's just an interesting player. He's a massive guy at 6'8", 374 pounds, and if one of the Browns starting tackles go down, he's next in line. So a good preseason could build confidence in him. For the Cowboys, I got Trey Lance. Now, Trey Lance is probably the 3rd string quarterback for the Cowboys, and he hopefully won't see any playing time next season. But Trey Lance was a former top 5 pick by the 49ers not too long ago, and he really hasn't had a chance to start in the NFL. He's had a bit of an unfair career, and he's never had that chance to start, but it'll be interesting to see how he plays in this preseason, and he might get a chance for either the Cowboys or another team in the future. Up next, we got the Broncos, and my pick is Bo Nix, the quarterback they selected in the first round in this past year's draft. Now, there's a chance he's not the starter during, week 1 of the regular season with Jarrett Stidham there, but if he has a really, really good preseason, I think Sean Payton would, have to be forced to play Bo Nix week 1 if he has that good of a preseason compared to Jarrett Stidham. And I guess Zach Wilson, but he's a little bit further down the depth chart. If you want even more draft content and my full 2025 draft guide, my Patreon is the perfect thing for you. You'll get access to all of my player rankings, which are updated daily, plus you'll get to see my full summer eval on players, advanced stats on players, and my draft grades on them as well. Not to mention weekly mock drafts and mock draft reactions. It's the best way to support me and the channel, not to mention it's only $5. Again, only $5. You can't even get a Big Mac for that price anymore. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description or the pinned link in the comments and join the family over there on Patreon. Now, back to the video. Next we got the Lions, and my pick is Jameson Williams. He's slotted in to be their second option at receiver. You know, he came off an ACL injury in his rookie season, didn't get much playing time, and last year, in my opinion, he just wasn't used right. He was just, you know, strictly a deep threat option for him, and the Lions didn't really push the ball downfield deep. But this year, he's gonna have to take a step up and probably be their third option in the receiving game. You know, right behind Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. So a big preseason could do wonders for him. Up next, we got the Packers, and I'm gonna say it's gonna be Jordan Morgan. Now, he was their first round pick in this past year's draft, and in my opinion, and a lot of others' opinion, I think it was a bit of a reach. In this preseason, it'll be a good time to prove, you know, me and all his haters wrong. Up next, we got the Texans, and my pick is Kamari Lassiter. He's slotted to be that number 2 cornerback alongside Derek Stingley, and it's really hard for rookies to come in and, you know, hit the ground running at cornerback at least. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays in the preseason, and hopefully that'll translate to the regular season as well. Moving on, we got the Colts, and it's Anthony Richardson. This is kind of an obvious pick. You know, he played pretty well in his rookie season up until he got injured, and now coming off the injury, a lot of people are hyping him up to be a dark horse MVP candidate, and I might be one of them. So it'll be interesting to see how good he plays in the preseason. Moving on to the Jaguars, my pick is Brian Thomas Jr., the former first round pick. And they don't really have a clear-cut number 1 option there in Jacksonville. It'll probably be Christian Kirk to start the season, but I wouldn't be surprised if Brian Thomas, you know, takes that number 1 spot by the end of the season. So it all starts with a really good preseason, and he's a really fun player to watch too, and he'll most likely make some crazy highlight plays in the preseason. Moving on to the Chiefs, we got Xavier Worthy. You know, he's being pegged as the next Tyreek Hill, and he might possibly be. He's super light, and that's my biggest problem with him. But with that speed, him and Patrick Mahomes are going to light the league up, hopefully. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays against more physical corners in the NFL. Moving on to the Raiders, my pick is Tyree Wilson. He's already being chalked up as a bust, and I think that's a little bit crazy. You know, he didn't have the best rookie season last year, but he's a big, long, and athletic edge rusher who I think could have a really big bounce back season, and it starts in the preseason, where he'll hopefully get off to a good start. Up next, we got the Chargers, and it's no secret that Quentin Johnston didn't have the rookie season that a lot of people thought he would. He struggled a lot last year, and right now he's pegged as a 4th wide receiver on the depth chart. But with a really good preseason, hopefully that can change and it can at least crack the starting rotation. So this preseason is going to be very big for Quentin Johnston. Moving on to the Rams, we got Blake Corum. Now, the Rams usually don't like playing their starters at all in the preseason, but I think Blake Corum could see some playing time. And he was a touchdown machine for Michigan last year, and he might take some red zone carries away from Kyren Williams in the regular season, so that's something to watch out for. Up next, we got the Dolphins, and my pick is Devon Achane. He's probably the fastest running back in the league, and he had so many home run hitting plays last year, but he was playing behind Raheem Mostert. Now, with Raheem Mostert, you know, getting up there in age, I think Devon Achane could solidify his spot as that running back number 1 for Miami, especially if he has a really good preseason. Up next, we got the Vikings, and my pick is JJ McCarthy, their first round pick in this past year's draft. You know, he might not get the start week 1 with Sam Darnold there, but it's going to be really interesting to see how he plays because he was widely viewed as a project quarterback coming out of college. But if he has a really good preseason, it'll be hard for the Vikings to not start him at some point in this regular season. Moving on to the Patriots, we got Drake May. Now, Drake May could possibly be the starter for the Patriots, especially with a really good preseason, and I think he's got the talent to absolutely light the preseason up as long as he gets the opportunity to do so. Now we got the Saints, and my pick is Trevor Penning. The Saints were desperate for offensive tackle help in this past year's draft, and they took Talise Fuanga. Trevor Penning might end up having to be that second tackle with Ryan Ramczyk's injury and possible retirement. And Trevor Penning has been very bad in his time in the NFL so far, but hopefully he can turn that around with a good preseason, and it'll be imperative for him to have a good preseason if the Saints want to have any type of success next season. Moving on to the Giants, we had Daniel Jones. Now Jones is coming off an ACL tear last year, and it's going to be really interesting to see how he plays after that ACL tear. And he finally, for the first time in his career, has a #1 target in Malik Neighbors. So it'll be interesting to see how that pairing and chemistry has developed, and hopefully we'll get to see that today in the Thursday preseason game. Moving on next, we got the Jets, and I'm going to go with Olu Fashanu, their first round pick in this past year's draft. Now he's not projected to be a starter quite yet, because they brought in Morgan Moses as well as Tyron Smith, but both of them are up there in age and have their injury problems, so I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in this regular season we get to see Olu Fashanu, so it'll be important to see how he plays in the preseason to get a grasp on how he's going to play in the regular season. Moving on to the Eagles, my pick is Saquon Barkley. Now I'm a Giants fan, and just seeing this is going to hurt really bad, but it'll be interesting to see how he plays with this, revamped offensive line, who's way better than the Giants' offensive line ever was. Now, we might not get to see him until the last week of the preseason, but hopefully we'll get to see him at some point, and it's going to be very fun to see him run behind an actual good offensive line for once. Moving on to the Steelers, I got Broderick Jones. Now, he got some playing time last year as a rookie, kind of bouncing between left tackle and right tackle. This year, he's going to be the starting right tackle for the Steelers, and it'll be interesting to see if he gets off on the right foot there in Pittsburgh. Coming up next, we got the 49ers, and my pick is Ricky Pearsall. The 49ers' whole offseason has been overshadowed with the Brandon Ayuk trade rumors, and since he's probably going to get traded before the regular season, Ricky Pearsall might be thrusted into that starting role, and he was viewed as a bit of a reach by many, but I think he's really good, and I think he could, he's not going to pick up the slack that Brandon Ayuk's going to leave behind, but I think in due time he will be able to. He's a really good route runner and a really good playmaker. Moving on to the Seattle Seahawks, my pick is JSN, aka Jackson Smith and Njigba. Now, he was kind of that third option at receiver last year, and I think this will be the year he overtakes Tyler Lockett and become that #2 option for the Seahawks. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays in the preseason to see if he's developed any since last year. Moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, my pick is Bucky Irving. Now, I was a huge fan of Bucky Irving coming out of last year's draft, so it's going to be interesting to see how he plays this year, because he's not going to get starter reps over Rachaad White, but he could play himself into a split backfield there in Tampa Bay, depending on how he plays in the preseason. Moving on to the Titans, my pick is Treylon Burks. Now, Treylon Burks was a first-round pick in, 2022, and he was looked to be the next, the replacement for A.J. Brown. He has not been that, and he's not even been close to being that so far, so much so that they had to bring in DeAndre Hopkins to kind of be that player. Now they have Calvin Ridley there. DeAndre Hopkins is out with an injury and will most likely miss the first couple weeks of the regular season, so it's imperative that Treylon Burks gets these reps in the preseason, and so hopefully that'll translate to the regular season for at least those first 2 games while DeAndre Hopkins is out. And then moving on to the last team, we got the Washington Commanders, and my pick is Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is most likely going to be the starter come week 1 of the regular season, so getting these mental reps and, just getting actual NFL action in the preseason is going to be very important for him and his development. And that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think of this video. Make sure you subscribe and like if you like the content, and as always, I'm the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.